Presidential watchers recently noticed how much Barron Trump has grown in the past year. The 12-year-old is now almost as tall as his president dad. How cool would it be to grow up in the White House? Few children in history have had the opportunity to call 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue home. President Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary Todd had 4 children, but only 2 got to live in the White House, William and Thomas. A year after their father was sworn in, William contracted a fever and died in the White House. He was 11 years old. The youngest son, Thomas, was known as Tad. Tad died several years after his father's assassination at the age of 18. Ulysses S. Grant and wife Julia had 4 children, who all lived with their father at one point during his time in the White House. Grover Cleveland and wife Frances Folsom had 3 young daughters during his second term in the White House. Ruth was born in between his non-consecutive terms. It was rumored that the Baby Ruth chocolate bar was named in her honor.
Baby Ruth with fudge and nuts and caramel.
But since it didn't happen until 17 years after she died, many believe it was a story made up by the candy company, so they wouldn't have to compensate a certain rising star in baseball for use of his nickname. Esther was the only president's child to be born in the White House. Marion was born 2 years after her. The Clevelands also had 2 sons after Grover left office. Theodore Roosevelt and his wife Edith raised 6 children in the White House. Alice was born to his first wife. Theodore Jr., Kermit, Ethel, Archibald, and Quentin were all born to Edith.
William Howard Taft, the 27th President of the United States.
William Howard Taft had 3 children with wife Helen, but only the youngest one lived in the White House. Charles Phelps II was 11 when he moved in. He would grow up to work in politics and become the mayor of Cincinnati.
Silent Cal Coolidge personified the quiet conservative New Englander like no other president before him.
President Calvin Coolidge and wife Grace lived with their 2 sons in the White House. John was 17 and Calvin Jr. was 15 when they moved in. But sadly, Calvin Jr. died less than a year later. He got a blood infection after developing a blister on his foot while playing tennis with his brother at the White House. John F. Kennedy and his wife, Jacqueline, moved into the White House with 2 young children. Caroline was 3, and John Jr., also called John, was an infant.
The nation mourns, the world grieves. The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead.
Less than 3 years later, they would both publicly mourn their father after he was assassinated. Images of John Jr. saluting his dad's casket are some of the most iconic in history. Sadly, John Jr. himself was killed in a plane crash with his wife and sister-in-law in 1999.
Morning, Caroline.
Thank you, Joel. I'm proud to be here with Deputy Mayor.
Caroline is active in politics today and served as the U.S. ambassador to Japan under the Obama administration. Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson had 2 daughters, but only Lucy Johnson lived at the White House. She was 16 when her father became president, and she seemed to enjoy helping her dad's campaign.
Lucy says she'll never tire of the campaign trail as long as the band plays on.
Her 1966 wedding was broadcast on television, and 55 million people reportedly watched. Her reception was held at the White House. Today, she's a successful businesswoman and is active in family foundations.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
President Gerald Ford and First Lady Betty moved into the White House with 2 of their 4 children. Susan was 17 and Stephen was 18. And they were lively, to say the least. Susan convinced her dad to host her senior prom in the East Room of the White House. And Stephen liked to brag about blasting Led Zeppelin from the rooftop of their home. Amy Carter was the youngest of 4 children born to Jimmy and Rosalind Carter. She was only 9 when her father became president and accompanied her mother on official outings. After life in the White House, she became an activist and spoke out about U.S. foreign policy towards South Africa during apartheid. Today, she's active in her father's foundation and works with him building houses for Habitat for Humanity. Chelsea Clinton is the only child of Bill and Hillary. While her parents insisted the media respect her privacy as the 12-year-old continued to grow up in the White House, she still accompanied her parents on official visits. She was especially active in both of her mother's runs for president. Today, she works for the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative and has written several books. George W. and Laura Bush moved into the White House with daughters Jenna and Barbara, the first twin children of a president. They were 19 and attending college at the time he became president, but were both active first daughters.
Hey, Barney, did I hear you and Miss Beasley are trying to become junior park rangers?
That's great. We love the national parks.
The twins co-wrote a book called Sisters First about growing up in a political family. Today, Jenna is a co-host on The Today Show, and Barbara is on the board of Global Health Corps, which she co-founded. Sasha and Malia Obama certainly grew up before the public's eyes. While President Barack and First Lady Michelle worked to ensure the girls had a normal and private childhood, they were still the president's kids and got to experience the world on official trips. Back at home, they helped perform other first kid duties like receiving the White House Christmas tree and volunteering to serve Thanksgiving dinner. Today, Malia is attending Harvard University and Sasha is finishing up high school. And the youngest person living at the White House today is Barron Trump. Even though the president has 5 children, Barron's the only one that can really be called the first kid. Barron is often seen jet-setting with his parents, Donald and Melania. He's become a trendsetter, as the t-shirts he wears tend to sell out in stores. He also knows when to sport a suit, like during his father's inauguration and the annual turkey pardon. While living in the spotlight as a president's child may be super embarrassing at times, it's a childhood experience unlike any other. Hail to these kids. For InsideEdition.com, I'm Mara Montalbano.